Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the August 18th, 2022 regularly scheduled Newmarket School Board meeting. I'd like to start tonight, as usual, with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. First item on our agenda is superintendent's report. Oh, I'm sorry, it is not. I forgot the new format already. Shame on me. The first item on our agenda is an opportunity for board comments and committee updates. Any committee updates for us, anyone? Budget committee's been quiet.
Policy meeting will be next week, and then I have a SST meeting on Monday.
Great.
Budget committee's at the end of the month, but this is the month they're doing town, so not really anything for us.
Very good. All right, thank you. Next up, we have the superintendent's report.
I'm going to make sure my mic's on this time.
Poor Tim doesn't need to come upstairs.
I've been accused of having a soft voice, but it's even softer when the mic is not on, so I want to make sure. I'm going to keep it short this week. I did want to mention a couple of things. I did meet with a community member wanting to plant on my radar, and also by being on my radar to suggest it to the board to be thinking about a start time. Apparently there's a obviously during the pandemic, I think there was a lot of shifts in start times, and it was a later start time at the junior senior high. And I just wanted to kind of put that on your radar. Is there's interest in the community to have that conversation. When I met with this community member, one of the things I said was I do anticipate when we're having our dialogues around vision of a graduate and trying to talk about what we want for our schools, there will probably be a place for those kind of conversations, and maybe that's the place for it. Obviously, we're not going to change start time between now and next week, but clearly it's something that I think there's an interest in the community to have some conversation about, so I just plant that seed with you as something to think about for future conversations.
I could say in the 15-year-old community, it's definitely been
What,
a
to
matter
start
of
at the
interest. I can tell
8:30
you
time
that.
are we talking about?
Well, I
Like we
think,
did this.
I think that's where there's room for conversation about it. I think during the pandemic, clearly the start time was later, and I want to say it was like 8:30. But we did not modify the end time, so the end of the junior senior high time was still compatible with after-school activities and so forth. And I think there's a little bit of a tension there between like how late can you start and how early can you end, because the overlap of after-school activities and so forth. So there's room for conversation. That being said, there's no question what research shows about the adolescent sleep patterns. I mean, basically they say, adolescents should get between 8.5 and 9.25 hours of sleep a night. They're nocturnal beings, so they typically, can't fall asleep early. And so if you're starting school at 7:35, they have to be up and about by 6:30. So the maximum number of hours they can get in that is, 7 to 8. And so you're starting with a sleep deficit issue. So I think research is pretty clear. I think the challenge is, as a community, there are structural things we can look at and so forth. And we did go through this process in my previous district at Oyster River, and we did make some changes, and we did modify the start time to a later time. But I think it's worthy of conversation in this community, what it would be. So I just put that on your radar. It's just something to think about, because we may be hearing from more community members about that subject. Another thing I wanted to just reiterate, and Patty Banfield is not here. She's on vacation this week, so I couldn't find my list of who the board committee reps are, but I'm assuming you guys will know. I do want to get the capital improvement committee going, and I know you've already assigned somebody on the board to that committee. It's Phil? Okay. I should just assume Phil, whatever committee I'm working on, Phil's there. All right. So we are going to, Jano and I will be working to get that started, because there are a couple of things actually that are sort of percolating up on our radar that we'd like to be able to start talking about and developing priorities. One issue is the playground at the elementary school, and actually one of the things that, and I thank Jana and her staff for doing work on this, we began to realize that there might be an opportunity to use some of our ESSER funds towards the playground, and so we have gotten conceptual approval from the DOE that we could do that if we choose to. So it's a question of, is that what we want to do? And so I think at that point it leads to a bigger conversation about the scope and so forth. So clearly there's that as one capital project that's sort of on the radar. And the other one, which is I've heard from a number of community members about, and if you walk through the junior senior high, you're left going, what is going on here? The courtyard, you know, clearly it's kind of like a hayfield right now, but clearly that was not the intention in the design. And so I know there's money that's been set aside for that, and I just think we have to devise a plan to move forward on it, because clearly, you know, we're the stewards of the district's facilities, and I think it's on us to do that. So anyway, so those are a couple of things I just wanted to plant the seed with the board, is just things that are there as things to think about under that topic. And then really actually any questions about that before I do?
How do you even get a mower in the courtyard now
I'm
that
assuming
I'm thinking about
it's
it?
probably not a riding mower. I'm assuming. I don't know.
Well, I think the issue is developing a design that probably eliminates the need to mow and those kind of things. So I think there are a number of possibilities, but right now it's not a, you know, it's certainly not an attractive space, and it's certainly not established as a resource for the school, and I think there's room for conversation. My understanding, again, this predates certainly my 3 full months of tenure here, but there was some dialogue around what that should look like, and so I just feel like we need to bring some closure to it and decide and move that along, because I think, like I say, I think people want to see nice facilities. We put a lot of money into them, and I think we have a lot to be proud of, and just finishing up some of these things would be really good.
We shouldn't dive into it too much, but it occurred to me there's, having gone to the Thompson School, there used to be a really good horticulture program there, as well as a landscaping program. So it'd be interesting to even get some folks
Sure.
from UNH to help, maybe as part of their
Yeah,
curriculum.
I think there's lots of possibilities. So anyway, so Phil, expect to hear from Jen and I soon, because we're going to get that committee started up again shortly.
So the town CIP is already starting to try to find dates, so.
Are they? Okay. All
Very,
right.
very good
That's
time.
gonna come like,
Yeah. Hopefully ours will be smaller in scope, but nonetheless, we do need to start establishing the plans for that. And then just the last thing I just wanted to mention, obviously you've probably seen on the message board in front of the junior senior high, we're advertising for the vacant positions that we still have. As of today, when we were in the middle of some contract negotiating, we discovered that we now are down 17 paraprofessionals. So clearly, if you're out there, anybody who's looking for a paraeducator position, please reach out to the district. We absolutely need that. But beyond the paraeducator concept, all of our other professional positions are full. All of our staffing is full, except for the fact that we are down 17 paras. And how many custodial and facilities?
we were able to fill some with part-time, so we're actually still down like 2.5 FTE,
Okay.
but we'll take part-time, full-time, day, night.
Okay, so 2.5 FTE custodial, but the within the teacher bargaining unit, and certainly all of our administrative positions were full. So that I'm very pleased with as we head into the start of school, and we've obviously there's a couple of those hires that are on the agenda for the night. So with that, that's all I have.
Great, thank you very much. Next, we're fortunate enough to have a professional development plan presentation by, let me get the title correct, our Director of Curriculum and Development and Professional Learning, Patty Wantz.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for allowing me to speak here. I just have a little brief update to share with you from the curriculum office. So we've been hard at work. How long have I been here? For a little over a month. But we first we've been sharing this with teachers as we've been meeting them, which has been really lovely, I know, for Todd and myself and Andy. There are no new initiatives this year. That really our goal is to continue to support the programs that have already been implemented and assist with supporting structures to really ease that efficiency and effectiveness of student learning. So what do I mean by that is, for example, our math program. So 2 math programs were implemented last year, Bridges for our K-5 students, and then illustrative math for 6 through 8, and then algebra 1, 2, and geometry. math teachers in the district really went through significant comprehensive training, which most of that was virtual, and I give them just a lot of credit. But they plowed through all that training, and I'm excited that I've already been in conversations with Heather Jenkins from Demonstrated Success, who is the math instructional coach for our K-5 teachers, to help with that implementation and support teachers. That we've already have our year mapped out with Heather. And the model that we're looking at is more of a push into the classroom to support teachers, a little multi-modal, if you will, approach for professional development, where Heather will be going in, modeling lessons or observing, and having teachers do peer observations, which is really powerful as a teacher, just to go into your colleague's classroom, because you never get the opportunity to do that, and to look at those instructional methods for implementing our math program. And then she'll also be meeting with teachers during the day, during like say 45 minutes in the day, so we'll have substitutes for that, hopefully, so that she can really go through that data, with both looking at student data performative assessments and summative assessments. So that work continues. And then the same with our illustrative math. It's a little bit of a different planning than at the elementary level, but again, it's that push-in model of the peer observations and following up with teachers afterwards in small grade level sessions to work with our teachers in our math department. So we're really excited to continue to support that work. I also wanted to share that our UBD work, our Understanding by Design, that Deb Black just put so much effort and time into that. And our teachers who are, I'm going to speak first to the middle and high school, so your non-math teachers really took on that work. And like any new time, I feel like you're implementing a new type of framework to support your curriculum. There are stages of learning and development and growth with that. We know we have some departments that might be a little bit further along than others, but that's okay. That we are here to support all of our teachers. Our math teachers for 6 to 8, the way that illustrative math is written, and even Bridges, it lends to supporting a UBD framework. And what I mean by that is that there are essential questions or enduring understanding that are laid out for each unit for our students. So it's very supportive in the sense of that UBD framework. So for example, there were some math teachers who took on some curriculum work over the summer to really look at their math assessment rubrics. And when they shared them with me, they're very much in line with the UBD framework. So I'm not trying to say that math teachers won't be trained in the UBD framework. They certainly will. But already the work that they're encompassing with this new resource is very much in line with the UBD templates. Now our K-5 teachers, because they teach all of the content areas, they were not a part of that UBD training because they were very much involved with the math training. And as we know, it's just not conducive to give teachers so much comprehensive training in different areas, but really that less is more approach. And so focusing just on mathematics last year for our K-5 teachers is very appropriate. And again, that training continues in a year 2 implementation stage this year. So what we will continue to, I'm working with Jay McTighe actually, founder of the UBD design, and we will be giving training to the K-5 teachers, but again, we want them to see that connection as well with their math resource, and really being conscientious to not overwhelm teachers either. So yes, there's training, but we don't want to overload our teachers as well, but instead, again, that less is more approach of going deeply in our practice so that we understand it and we're able to implement those instructional routines within our classroom. I did want to point out that and kind of celebrate, there were 7 teachers who completed summer curriculum work and submitted their units, the from scope and sequences to templates that support that UBD framework for units of study within their content area. I also wanted to share that at our administrative retreat, we spoke a lot about, had some really great conversation about what do our multi-tiered systems of supports look like within our school, meaning how do we provide for all of our students. I did share pretty brief PowerPoint on just how do you build that framework within your school and what does that look like. And more importantly, what are the components needed in order to effectively implement a multi-tiered system of support, meaning how are we meeting all the needs of our students both academically and behaviorally? And what do those supports look like in schools and what needs to happen? So each of the schools, they're going to be defining their MTSS leadership team. They're going to review the student data that they expect to collect. Then with that data, they'll determine how they will know if students are making progress. And then they're going to really need to look at their infrastructure. What does their school schedule look like? What might need to shift so that we can provide time in the day to support our students? And then lastly, we looked at how can we, when we look at that data and address the students' needs both academically and behaviorally, how does that support also when we talk about agency, student agency or student ownership of learning, how are we also supporting that? So students are owning their learning and that students are supported in that as well. And that was about it. Oh, I also wanted to say too, a part of our professional development are all of the digital learning tools that we have in our district, which our teachers I know are very appreciative of the digital learning tools that they have access to. And I've been on quite a few Zoom calls this week, meeting our vendors and PD consultants, and our next steps of working closely with Deb Jankowski, our tech coordinator. She and I again are meeting tomorrow. But looking at Edmentum is one of our digital learning tools that works in partnership with NWEA, and that's our universal assessment for reading and math for all of our students. And so really looking at what do our teachers need in terms of their ease with using that technology. So that's that other space saver for more professional development to support our teachers. Edmentum is a great tool, not just for credit recovery. I think you heard that word a lot with our high school students with credit recovery, but also to provide students another way to learn in a different format and to reinforce a skill or a concept, or perhaps in an intervention group to reteach and to use those resources. Edmentum it was very widely viewed in a positive light, I know, over the summer with our middle school and high school summer programming. And also within Edmentum is Exact Path, and so that's the pathway each student receives after they take their NWEA in reading and math. This pathway, this personalized learning platform is designed for each and every child based on how they did on their NEWA in the reading and the math. And so we're looking more into that scheduling and structure of how do we get students to work on their individualized pathway, because that's addressing the exact skills and skill gaps that students have. So in order for us to fill those gaps, we need to know what they are, and students need to know what they are too. So really having some conferencing and letting students be aware of exactly the skills that they're working on for both reading and mathematics. So I don't know if you have any questions. That was a lot.
Well, it's an amazing advancement since I went to school that we can be so specific towards each student and their individualized learning path. So
Yeah,
pretty amazing.
it really is, those pathways, and that Edmentum reads NWEA and creates this pathway for students. And even within that, it helps teachers group students right down to the standards of where students are with regard to their proficiency. So it's a really neat tool for
Thank you very
teachers.
much. Does anyone have any questions or comments?
I just had one question. Will we be meeting in September for the,
The PD committee, yes, we
Okay.
are. I just wanted to get through, or like kind of get through that first week and
Yeah.
welcoming back the staff. And then I do have the list of the PD committee, because the first thing up is our PD plan, because it expires at the end of December.
Right.
But, yeah,
okay,
yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you for that.
September 1st, we meeting, we expect an update from the committee.
okay, you got it.
And then if I just ask for a favor that not at the beginning of the school year, but like as you get into it, kind of just give us an update how the Wednesdays are going. Like early
Oh,
on.
yeah, I mean, actually, that was another big part of our retreat was scheduling those Wednesdays. And so both principals have a set schedule for their Wednesdays that they'll be sharing with their staff.
Awesome.
And so just in case the staff give them feedback, we don't want to come right out and say,
Yeah.
here's what they look like, because I feel like the staff need to kind of give their feedback as well. But there are great plans in place of utilizing those days for professional development, talking about students.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great.
And I did invite Sean and Andy to be at the September 1st meeting, and we'll make sure they're ready to just tell you kind of about that.
And
Yeah,
I understand
once
too
they
that
roll it
you-
out to the staff,
I
yeah.
understand too. It usually takes a few weeks for things to work. So if it spills into October too, it's.
I think there's going to be what are we planning and what are
Yeah.
we trying to do,
Yeah.
and how effective is it, and how's it working on the student side of the equation. I think that those are all things we need to talk about as we go forward. Yep.
Yeah, great.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome, thank you.
And
Karen?
since you, I'm sorry.
That's all right. One other, it's great, the additional tools that we're giving the teachers to work with. One of them I hear parents, particularly middle school and high school parents, comment on a lot that we might be able to do more with or do better with is Infinite Campus. And the particular thing I hear people react to is that sometimes Infinite Campus seems to get a little out ahead of the teachers and the pace of their grading and the pace of, so you for your students, you end up getting emails that say, oh, Jimmy has a 40 in science right now. Whoa, what does that mean? And
Yeah.
you realize it's just that something was flagged as being due, but it hasn't been graded yet. So
Exactly.
consequently, the system says, I don't have a grade for this, it must be a 0. I don't know if that is a configuration thing that we could make.
I'm writing that down because I'm meeting with Debbie actually tomorrow morning. And I know that she is so much more of an expert on Infinite Campus. But I'm wondering, I remember like, with Power School, that's what I was used to. It's another student learning management system. But there were certain controls that you could turn off so that those messages weren't being sent. Otherwise, a parent is being inundated with messages, and you can turn off those controls. So I think it's something, it's definitely worth, I'm going to have that conversation with Debbie tomorrow, and that maybe we can look into helping teachers with, maybe if it's simple within their dashboard that they can turn off messages, or even with parents too, is there something where we can say to parents, just turn off X, Y, and Z, so they're not inundated?
I mean, it just seems like two good opportunities. One, to reduce the stress on parents of getting
Oh.
emails that indicate their kid is failing something.
Absolutely,
it's
I
gotta
can
be-
imagine,
yeah.
yeah, that's,
And it's got to be easier for the teachers too, if they're
Yeah.
not having to come
Yeah.
home and respond to 9 emails from parents saying, why does my kid have a 35 in your
I
class?
do think one of the other variables, just to kind of throw it in there, is around when you're talking about competency-based learning. Most of our great and Infinite Campus is one of them, as is Power School, you name it. They're not really set up particularly well to account for competency-based learning. They typically are much more adept at formulas. And so if a teacher puts in 5 assignments and 2 of them haven't been recorded, that's going to show up mathematically as a fairly low score. Whereas the child might actually have done exceptionally well on the thing that was called the summative assessment. It's just the formula doesn't quite match. So that's another thing that is a sort of a constant tinkering that you work through, is how do you make a system designed for traditional grading
Right.
work to communicate about competencies, and how do you balance that? So it's, yeah, they're kind of ongoing, but the idea of turning things off is a very simple solution that you can turn it on periodically when it's appropriate so that people can get the feedback they need.
Yeah, I think that might be worth a conversation. Maybe you turn it off turn it on at progress report time, or maybe there are certain points before progress report. Those are great conversations to have with teachers and families too.
Thank you for looking into
Yeah,
it.
no, you're welcome. Thanks.
Actually, since you mentioned Wednesdays, I just wanted to just reiterate something we've talked about before, but wouldn't hurt to reiterate again, is that we realize that Wednesdays, a half an hour early is a hardship for families. But with those 30 minutes, with the addition of the 45 minutes, teachers agreed to stay, has provided us with how much time? 20 hours of additional?
Well, it's, it's 32 additional Wednesdays at 45 minutes apiece, plus extra time on 4 other Wednesdays where it's a half day. So you're going to put me on the spot to do the whole math, but it's probably 24 hours of PD time plus another, so 34 hours, something like that.
Which is going directly back to teaching and helping kids learn more better, as I was taught. So, you guys can evict me anytime. All right, thank you very much, Betty. Next, we're fortunate enough to have Jenna Mellon here, an honorary member of the board and business administrator. You've come to every single meeting, I think, so far in the last 2 months.
Well, it's just the time of year. So thank you. Hello, everybody. You didn't mention it, but I'm assuming you want me to do the unassigned.
I was just going to say, and that's to discuss the unassigned fund balance that's going back to the tax rolls for
Okay.
fiscal year 2022.
So there will be much more to come on this. This is very early in the cycle. We just had our audit the 3rd week of July, and then it takes the auditors some time to prepare. But I know everybody anxiously awaits that number, the budget committee as well. So while I hope to have full financials for the quarter ended June 30th ready for you in September, I don't know what meeting you would like them at, but I hope to have those prepared for you soon, which will have much more information. But for the purposes of just kind of easing people's minds and giving you an idea of where we're at, every year at the close of the fiscal year, the school district is required to compile all of our financial data, and we create some reports that we submit to the state and to the Department of Education. So we have done that, and those reports, I'm happy to say, are complete. We're waiting approval at the state level, but the nice part of having an early audit is that we can also make sure that there aren't any adjustments or anything that we should be making to that state report before we submit. So while our audit is not technically final until the auditors send the report, it's highly unlikely that there would be any further adjustments because we've already done the field work and we've already ticked and tied. And so with that said, at the end of the year, we have something called the unassigned fund balance, which is basically it's what's left over after you've gone through the year. It's a formula. It's composed of many things. Primarily, in most years, it relates to unexpended budget expenditures, and then you could have additional revenues in there, and then there are generally some accounting adjustments. So this year, we have an unassigned fund balance to reduce taxes of $1,096,700, and that's a lot. But I also want to point out to you that of that amount, over half of it is due to revenues, unanticipated revenues that we worked really, really hard to bring into the district. So it's not that we are far off on our expenditures. We really aren't. We did a pretty good job of managing that, and like I said, if I ever run it down to zero, you should ask me about why I did that, because you never want to go into the year without a little bit left, because things happen in at the end of the year. But I think it's really incredible and a lot of hard work has gone into it, but over $500,000 of this money is actually a good thing. It's not that we weren't managing the budget or we asked for too much. It's money that we found and capitalized on, and opportunities that we capitalized on. So I just want to leave you with that point. In my coming report, I will break it down further for you and kind of show you where all of those buckets are and how they arrive at this number. But the greatest component of it, actually, by and large, is the extra revenues we were able to obtain. So, does anyone have any questions for me?
Of the other $500,000, roughly how much is due to not being able to staff to the level we wanted to?
I'm actually working on that at this time. I hate to toss a number out there, but I think if I had to give you an approximate, I'd say salaries and benefits. I think we had unexpended amounts there, but if you also remember on the operational side, we had over expenditures. So if I gave you the number, it's going to sound large, but then you have to consider that some of those salaries were actually shifted to operations in our custodial model. So if it's okay, I'd prefer to wait until I have the numbers in front of me. I'd hate to misspeak and have somebody misinterpret what I say by hearing.
Is it safe to say a big chunk of that other $500,000 is probably unexpended?
Yeah, we have about 400,000 of it roughly is from unexpended expenditures. But when you start looking at salaries, benefits, and the
Okay.
operational side, those things net together to give you that bottom number.
I guess I was just trying to make, I know we were down 9 paras all last year, and
Yeah.
there's a number of positions that were,
Yeah.
so.
Well,
it
in the
stands to reason
custodial-
A big chunk of that is probably is unexpended.
Right.
per
Right, and the custodial salaries too. I mean, there's money sitting on those lines because we didn't expend them as salaries. We expended them as professional services down below in the outsource model. So
Yeah, I only ask because we don't, just want to be careful about the expectation that this sets, because me personally at least, had we been able to fill those positions, I would have rather spent the money.
right.
But
Yeah.
oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, for the last 3 years, it's been over $1 million, and it's been largely, well, not largely, but because of the hard work of Jan and the folks there and the staff, because of staff shortage, because of grants. So, yeah, it's something I think I've cautioned every year is don't expect it.
Yeah,
Fortunate
exactly.
it happened, but yeah.
Exactly, and if you pull the revenues out of this picture, we really are returning more in line with what you've seen historically to the district. So when you add the revenues in, that's what's boosting up this number.
Is there a way, and I hesitate to draw any conclusion from any trends over the last 2.5 years, like moving forward, but is there a way, like over time, we can be looking at where that money is coming from in terms of budget lines and think like, are there places where we might just be over budgeting by like, maybe not a lot, but like a little bit, just to like, you know what I'm saying? Like to find some trends so that in case there are spots that are not the unfortunate situation where we're understaffed, but like we just might be over budgeting a line, like some supply or something.
That actually is part of our process each and every year. The challenge has been in 1920, COVID happened.
Yeah,
and
the
so
last
we
3
didn't-
years,
didn't-
like,
right.
I'm just thinking more of moving
And
forward.
then when we budgeted for the next year, we said, well, surely we must be done with this by now. And no, we weren't quite done with that. And then we come into this year, well, we have to be done by now. And so, we're hoping that this is going to be the more normal of the years. But we have always looked at, budgeting in a way. Every year we do a careful analysis. Each department head, works with works with the superintendent to go through, really look at what we're asking for. So, to your point, it's been very difficult to hit a moving target.
Yeah, I mean, like this last, right, and I would even hesitate to say like, oh, we can reduce this line item because we spent this much, like less than that
Yeah.
last year, even if it was a normal year, because
Yeah.
who knows what like weird landscape things, but trend analysis over time, if
Yeah.
there's certain budget lines that tend to be over budgeted,
Right.
that to me seems like the opportunity.
And
Yeah.
and the reverse is also true if you want to
Where
talk
we under budget.
you want
Yeah,
to
I
talk
totally
about
agree.
you want to talk about utilities, right? Who would have foreseen a 40% increase in utilities when we budgeted last year, right? So we hit it. Well, you saw that. Okay, well, except for Mr. Smith. No, and truthfully, when we budgeted last year, we budgeted with a 35% increase, but we still missed it. So I mean, that's it's just one of those things that when you budget so far in advance, sometimes the trending data isn't as meaningful as we wish it were.
And I would obviously, with this being my first go-around with the budget process, my intention is to sit with every department head, every principal, and go through everything in their budget and have conversations about why is that. And a lot of times it is just a matter of looking at a cost center and saying, well, why are you budgeting X? Oh, well, we based it on X number of dollars per kid, and we just threw that in there. Well, how much are you actually spending? And you look back on the previous year, and it's like, wait a minute, you only spent half of that. Why did, a lot of times there is a lot of those sort of rollover type things that you can have conversation about. So I anticipate a lot of that. I mean, we were Jen and I were talking about personnel, and there's, like at some point you ask yourself if you can't fill positions for a long period of time and you figured out ways around it, at what point do you say, well, how many do we really need if we've been able to function in that way? So, but those are real conversations that can result in real savings at some point. Yeah.
Does anyone have any other questions for me about this?
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Next up is the school reentry plan.
Well, at the last meeting, I kind of gave you a general overview of kind of my thinking and promised you a very exciting memo on our school reentry plan, and so I have delivered that memo to you tonight. I guess I'd like to start by just kind of talking about sort of the intellectual paradigm that has shifted in the way people are thinking about managing COVID kind of moving forward. And I think it's important to note that this is the 4th school year that we're about to enter that has had an impact from this. And I think clearly early on, because of, for lots of very good reasons, there were lots of measures taken at the local level, at the school level to kind of manage things. Much of it was kind of a top-down structure. Naturally, you had, okay, we need to put these protocols in place in order to protect our students, and so that led to a lot of the cohorting structures, the limitations of the number of kids could be on buses, masking requirements, and all of those things. We're now at a point where, although the COVID is not at what experts call endemic, it is kind of here, and it's something that we all have to sort of figure out how to manage. And I think last spring, the Newmarket, pretty much all of last year, Newmarket was largely in what would be, I'm going to use air quotes, what would be called a semi-normal structure. Students coming, for the most part, being in person. There were still various structures in place that sort of made it challenging to function. So, for example, if you're not able to maximize the capacity on a bus, clearly you can't transport as many kids, and therefore bus schedules have to be adjusted to provide for that. If you can't put a full number of kids in the cafeteria, then you're limited by how your school schedule has to function. You have to run more lunch schedules. So we are at a point now where I think it's safe to say that the shift is away from a managed approach from the school district and the community as well to more of a individual risk analysis and individual decision model. What that means is I think the paradigm has shifted to we need to be aware of circumstances, we need to be monitoring them, we need to be agile enough to make an adjustment if we have to, but I think it means that we're putting the onus of responsibility on families to make decisions about how they will approach things. So as we approach the return, we're going with what I would call a model that would be best described as close to pre-pandemic normal as we can get, with some kind of things that are in place to monitor and protect against the spread of COVID. So what does that mean? Kind of running through the list of things that we're looking at. Full-size classes. What does that mean? Well, that full-size classes means you're not trying to cohort. You're not creating a structure that allows you to say, okay, we have a positive in room X. Okay, now we know who was exposed, and there's that sort of contact tracing concept. So by saying we're going to have full-size classes, particularly at the junior, senior, high level, where there's going to be mixing of kids and clearly you're acknowledging that that's not something that you can manage. Doesn't mean you're not paying attention to it, and certainly if somebody has symptoms and so forth, it doesn't mean we're not going to manage that and deal with it, but that structure is in place. Masking becomes optional for anybody at any time who feels that it's appropriate. I'll talk in a minute about what the current CDC guidance is around the managing of exposures and/or COVID, but you're not going to see any top-down edicts that masking is required. Certainly there will be conversations between the school nurses and families when a situation presents itself and will be encouraged. But obviously at any point anyone can choose to wear a mask if that's what they feel more comfortable with. The structure of the day, returning to the start and end times that had historically been in place. And that means for the elementary school, the instructional day will begin at 8:45 and end at 2:50. Students actually start arriving at 8:30, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But I mean, we're going back to a full-length 6-hour and 5-minute instructional day, which during the pandemic it was more like 5 hours and 40 minutes. Junior, senior high, returning to, and of course that's where we're talking about the concern about start time, but we're returning to the pre-pandemic start time, which was 7:35, to allow us to have that full-length academic day. So that gives us a 6-hour and 55-minute academic day at the junior, senior high level, which when you're looking at the range of options and needs that kids have for support, obviously more instructional time is better. Bus routes are, bus routes will be normal. The one caveat is, staffing can play a role in busing. Right now we have enough drivers so that the regular runs will be running as normal, and that's good. What we do lack, by the way, is the ability to support extracurricular activities on buses. I would say, just as a side point, Jamie Hayes has been working tirelessly to figure this stuff out, and he's got sort of a inside track on another bus contractor who looks like they might be able to provide for all of our extracurricular needs. Fingers crossed that pans out. But nonetheless, transportation will be an issue, but not because of the need to keep kids spread out necessarily, as much as it's just staffing will be the issue there. So that's what buses mean. We are, one of the things that's interesting, as you look at a lot of the protocols that were put in place during the pandemic, in many ways they kind of were exactly contrary to what school security people would have suggested. Examples would be, having outdoor classrooms that are just tents with no walls, having kind of students that are, so there are less controls for involvement. And so at our two buildings, we have really exceptional security systems set up, but during the pandemic, we were having kids come in at all the different entrances. So at the beginning of the day, you had, 8 different doors that people were coming and going, and it does inhibit your ability to manage things from a security standpoint. So we are returning to that model of having all students that are on buses entering through the front door where the drop-off is, where there's one entrance, and then there'll be an additional entrance, which is the drop-off pickup entrance that parents will use. And so there basically will be two entrances. That will give us a much better sense security-wise of how we can manage the comings and goings. So while it'll be a little bit of a retraining of people to kind of get back to that, because nobody likes to do the extra walk around the side of the building, we are going to be pushing that, but we feel confident that that's the best way to do it. And given, I should have pointed out at the beginning, the really low rate of COVID spread and the high rate of COVID vaccinations in this community really does make you realize that it's not as significant of a risk as maybe it was a year or two ago. Athletics are already started up, and will be returning to as much normal competition as they and participation as they can get. I mean, clearly, some of it does depend on the other schools they're playing against, and there will still be times when Jamie might have to negotiate with a school because maybe they have different protocols that they have in place for how we go about playing them. But in general, we would like to see our athletes to be able to compete in the pre-pandemic way without needing masks and that kind of thing. Recess and lunch will be done, managed similar to the way they were pre-pandemic. What does that mean? I mean, at the elementary school, basically it means they have a lunch for each grade level, and they kind of rotate through. Sean will be ready for if kids would prefer not to. If kids and or families would prefer they not be in a large group setting, we'll be prepared to offer an alternative place to eat. But in terms of the structure of the school day, we'll be running it based upon that model. Junior, senior high, very similarly. We'll just be going back to a normal structure. One of the things you do realize is, while from a health perspective, it made a lot of sense to do some of these structures, it did inhibit things from happening effectively during the school day. When you're running a school that has to basically start serving lunch at like 9 o'clock in the morning, you have to do it all day long to get everybody rotated through. It's a structural thing that will hopefully also free up staff to be able to do other things too. That it doesn't just involve supervising in the cafeteria. And then the last one, which we already talked about back in July, returning to a model where outside groups can start to reserve facilities. Dave Riley has been doing a great job of that. We've had a handful of organizations reach out, and we're in the process of sort of sorting out their needs. The one caveat, and again, this is not a COVID thing, it's more of a staffing thing. Our staffing level might interfere with our ability to support some outside groups, and we'll have to work on how can we best meet the needs of groups. But I think as we discussed back in July, I think we all agreed the community's ready to get into our buildings again and start to use them, especially the gyms and those larger spaces. So those are the elements of what we would call normal that we would like to see return to. And certainly the principals are kind of working to sort of create those structures. As far as how do we anticipate managing the COVID as it comes up, COVID's not gone. It's not going away. I mean, they are projecting. It's not gone, Philadelphia, right?
Painfully aware.
So anyway, so it's not gone. So we do have to continue to manage it. And so certainly we will continue to promote the daily self-evaluations that people have, and continue to educate people that if you have any symptoms, please stay home. Please stay home, because those are the circumstances that will shut down a school. If somebody is positive and they're in the environment and people are exposed, that's how you get spread. So we will continue to encourage that. Our nurses, I met with them. I've met with them a couple of times. They're very ready to kind of return some of their functioning back to kind of normal nurse office related things. However, they're ready to support families that need testing. They will, if people would like to schedule testing, they will still be able to do that through our nurses' offices, and they will also be able to provide home tests while supplies last, as we can get them, as if people need them. So we will continue to do that. They will use the current CDC guidelines that have literally. When I wrote this memo, there were different guidelines, and then when I finished the memo, Diane McCormick said, "Hey Todd, guidelines changed yesterday. Here they are." So just to kind of just give you an idea of just how fluid they are. But I did provide you. I gave you handouts. There's a link in the document, but obviously you can't open a link on a piece of paper. So I apologize for that. So one of them is managing, how people with COVID will be managed. I mean, that's not changing too much. If you're a positive for COVID, you will immediately need to isolate for 5 days. On the 6th day, if you have been symptom-free for 24 or more hours, you can return to normalcy with a mask, and they recommend staying masked through 10 days. That's for a positive. If you're exposed, there is some variation there in terms of exposure and vaccinated exposure and not vaccinated in terms of what the process would be. But basically, it becomes immediately an issue of self-monitoring if you've been exposed. Obviously, the minute you show symptoms, you should immediately isolate. You should wear a mask in the short term, but you can continue to be in the normal environment, doing what you need to do, just masked for that period of time. And then obviously, the recommendation is to test on day 6. And if you're negative on day 6, then life goes on. If not, you obviously start the protocol because you've now tested positive and you would be out 5 days and so forth. But again, that's current CDC guidance, and our nurses' offices will be very ready to advise families as issues come up. In fact, I guess my biggest point of that would be parents and so forth. If your child is feeling unusual or any symptoms, you're curious or questioning, ask, call the nurses' offices and talk to them, and they will talk you through it, or call your healthcare provider and they will talk you through it. And then lastly, just some sort of just basic guidelines we will continue to promote and encourage. We will continue to encourage everyone to stay up to date on their vaccines, including boosters. That's in fact, that's probably one of the Newmarket rate of vaccination is very high, and that's a very good thing. We will, continue with the self-monitoring checklist. Any of the symptoms, please, stay home until you can confirm things. Unexplained symptoms, again, seek out advice from a healthcare provider. That's one of the weird things about COVID is that sometimes the symptoms are just weird stuff, and it's hard to pinpoint exactly what it is. And then lastly, if you are out, for positive exposure, when you return, please wear a well-fitted mask through day 10 because that's how it's best to protect everybody. And I guess the last thing I would say on this before I take questions is one of the assumptions in this is we're putting a lot of trust and faith in our community to do the best they can to help us manage this. And obviously that trust hopefully will work out, but clearly if a family member, if a family chooses to send their child to school with symptoms without communicating it and exposes others, it does put the community at risk. So I really want to encourage people to daily do those self checks and just realize that the decision you make, yes, it's about your child and your child's ability to do school, but it's also about everybody else's ability to continue in that environment. So the more we can kind of look out for each other, the more we can have normal school all year long. So that's the goal. So on that note, and the last thing, we are going to continue to track our data. We'll continue to have the dashboard populated, and we will continue to track the data that is available through the state right now. But I think it's important to acknowledge that it's all self-reported stuff. So I looked this morning, Newmarket, there's 13 COVID cases in town. I don't know. It's clearly if it
were at my house.
so it's hard to know how accurate that number is. So I think that number in and of itself is probably not the best gauge. So we are what I tend to look at is hospitalizations and like is there an uptick in the severe stuff, and in that combined with other data would then cause us to say, okay, we might need to take an action. I would point out that some of the things that we were able to do in past incarnations of reentry are no longer available to us as options in terms of how we manage things. So we're closing down school for a long period of time is just simply not going to be something we're going to be able to do. We might have to do some supporting of students while they're out if there's a particular uptick, but we need to keep school functioning for a lot of very good reasons. So any comments or questions?
I have a few questions. So back to the nurses at the schools. Will they, just for clarification, if a child comes in, has a cough or some symptoms, will they be doing tests on those children or just sending them home and saying test?
They will have a conversation with the parent about how they would like to proceed. They can implement a test if the parent would like them to. When a kid comes to one of the things in discussion with our nurses that they would like to have, in fact they're looking forward to having this ability, is to really look at the whole situation. Because one of the things that happens, rightfully so, when the pandemic was at its most impactful, I think there was a lot of fear, and so if a person had any symptom, we immediately assumed that was it. And in particular, kids with allergies
Right.
had a disproportionate number of times being sent home. And so one of the things we will do is work with families, like if your child has seasonal allergies, can we get some kind of diagnosis to that to make sure we know that, so that we're not constantly in this back and forth.
Right, I think that happened a lot last year,
yeah.
and, folks were unhappy with that because their kids were coming home. If they had a headache, they were going home. If they had, an earache, they were going home. It just seemed like you could have every symptom, it didn't matter. So I think parents were really frustrated last year with that. And I just wanted to know if that was gonna be.
Yeah, we did, we've been working between the two schools because there was also one of the issues were how things were managed was a little different from one school to the other. So if you had a kid in the elementary and a kid in the high school, it might have been different messages being given. And we're trying to get to a place where if there is a difference in the process, it makes sense and it's something that we can all defend. But I think a lot of our process will focus on if a student is showing symptoms, the nurse will be involved in it. They will have conversations with families. Certainly, we will have the capacity to give a test if that's something that the family would like to do, or we can send them home and the family can manage it on whatever they want. Obviously, that communication loop would need to continue until we're sure that we've been given some level of understanding that this was not an issue. One of the things we have had a lot of conversation about, though, is at the junior senior high, because it's a credit-bearing system, there's more focus on attendance of related absences being documented. So there has been a pretty hard and fast policy about if you're out for 3 days, and a document from a doctor saying that you were out for 3 days was required. And that is a hardship in many cases, because there's not a lot of doctors actually who will sign a document saying this kid absolutely does not have COVID, because it's one of those things like even a negative test doesn't necessarily give you enough. So getting a document like that is very challenging. So we are going to encourage, like we say, documenting that your child has seasonal allergies, trying to have as much information as we can, so that our nurses can work with families to make the best call for those situations. I guess what it comes down to is trusting our nurses to make the best judgment that they can, and with the idea that if there is any real concern that it's a positive or might be, we will not be sending them back into the mainstream of the school until we can verify that, but with a desire to keep kids in class and learning as much as we possibly can.
And last year, they had it on the school website, their protocol that they would follow, so we'll update that as well.
So, and actually, that's one of my items for tomorrow, once I shared this with you, to go through and basically most of what's there is going to go away, and there'll be a couple of new links added in addition to the update of the dashboard and then just the reentry plan memo.
Okay. So I had a couple other questions.
Sure.
As far as the bus contracts are concerned, you mentioned that Jamie was looking into another company. Now with First Student, is that in our contract that they provide the buses for athletics, or is that separate?
Now,
Because I'm just wondering if there's gonna be extra cost.
do you want to jump up and answer, since you're here, Jenna?
Sure.
And you're an honorary member of the board anyway.
So our regular transportation contract covers just to and from school transportation. So it will cover the vocational students that go to SST, and it will cover our regular transportation routes.
Okay.
Special ed transportation is covered under a different
Right.
contract, and athletics is done basically, they are our provider, but we don't have a set contract or a set amount that we pay. We have a per trip fee that's calculated based on mileage and the usage and all of those things. So those come in on an individual invoice basis. We send them over usually for athletics. We send them over to the
So it
athletic
comes out of their budgets when they.
It comes out of
every year
athletic
they-
budget, yes,
Okay.
and the athletic director typically will cross-check that against the athletic schedules, sign off on the invoices saying, yes, we went to the school on that day.
Okay.
So, no, it's not something we prepay for.
Okay.
Typically, correct me if I'm wrong, Jenna, we've had a driver that's sort of like a floater, if you will, that can fill in for people who are absent and cover field trips in or things like that through First, right? So that's really where we don't have the staffing.
Well, First itself, we come out of a regional hub, for lack of a better word, that covers Exeter, us, and I believe 2 other districts. So in the past, they've had a thicker reserve capacity for drivers that they've been able to have people move and cover those routes. But they are struggling just to get enough drivers to cover the basic transportation routes. So they're very thin in those additional part-time drivers who might float We didn't have one dedicated to our district, but they usually were able to move
through the
people
next year.
around, yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
I have one more. Well, actually two. Lockers are gonna be utilized this year, right?
Yes.
Because that was a big question. And then, the entrances, you mentioned there'll be two. Are we talking about the side, the newer one?
So
Side
at the
entrance?
junior, senior high, it would be and actually I should mention that, we had a Homeland Security, visit back in July where we kind of reviewed all of our security protocols. And so one of the recommendations, just in security beyond just lockdown type security too, how do we make the environment around our school as safe as possible? And one of the things that our local police department has been concerned about is the way we have had student parking interact with the public has led to some hazardous driving conditions, particularly at the end of the school day. So we are actually moving all student parking across the street. So all student parking will be in the lot
That's a
across
good
the
idea.
street. And actually, we were able to actually secure, I believe Andy told me, like 90 spaces where I think we only had 79 before. So there's more
okay.
spaces. So that's one component. Staff will be parked on the side of the school. So as far as how students will enter the building, buses will arrive in the front, they'll go in through the front door. The loop around the school, the drop-off will be for the junior, senior high will be the entertainment wing entrance to the gym,
Yes,
that
okay,
side.
yep.
So that will be that, so those are the two entrances.
Okay.
Student drivers will park across the street, cross the crosswalk and enter through the front door. At the elementary school, the front door is the primary one where buses will enter. The back side, which is was the loop that was
Right.
being used on the back side of the building, will be the drop-off pickup spot for all elementary
Okay.
families want to drive.
Okay, thank you.
I just had one question. I know we're encouraging mask use. Are we also going to provide them for those who want them?
While supplies last, we have a lot of masks. We do.
Great, good to hear.
We'll send them to you, Phil.
I'm John, tomorrow I'm John.
All right, thank you very much for that. I'll move on to discussion items. First item being school board goals. So we talked about this a little bit last week. Phil, you brought up, I think, a good point about we really need to start thinking about kind of what process we're going to use to determine how the goals proceed and how we work on them. The first item, district leadership, I had the task of coming up with some options for the board to review so we could determine how to best proceed. So I'm going to present that in a little bit. The district vision, I think, will be kind of led by, obviously, the superintendent and administrative team. But we do need to figure out how we want to proceed with the review of legal counsel and practices as well as board practices. So I guess the question is, does someone want to take on ownership of maybe figuring out the process for those items, how to proceed with those items? Who and what? You both want both. I mean, it's up to you.
Doesn't matter, whatever. I'll do what Dan doesn't do.
Which do you prefer?
That honestly doesn't matter to me.
This is just
Uh-huh.
mapping out the process
Yes,
for the
process.
board, a draft process for
Right.
the board to agree
Yeah.
on.
Right.
So,
Right,
All right, I'll do the legal counsel.
okay.
And then Paul, maybe you'll do the board practices. Great. Does anyone have any additional thoughts on the board goals?
Just, obviously, like, the vision one can get moving whenever the superintendent starts moving it, like, it would just, once that happens, I would love just a standard process, like, maybe standard agenda item of like, where are we with it?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think even like a monthly or every 6 weeks update on the board goals is probably a good idea as well, right? So the public
Yeah.
knows we're
And
doing
we-
our job.
We get to, I think we get to decide, right, how we approach it, which I think will come in a conversation after Dan and Amy do their work around, do we wanna do a sprint on like one goal, we focus on that goal like a
Yep.
laser, do we wanna run two concurrently, like, how do we wanna handle it?
Great. All right. Thank you very much. Discussion item 2 is board correspondence. I I don't recall receiving any. I'm pretty sure I haven't. Has anyone else received anything? Okay. That was easy. Then we move on to preliminary discussion of superintendent timeline. So as I just mentioned during our last meeting, we discussed trying to come up with a process or we discussed coming up with a review of what the options might be and deciding on what option we'd like to kind of pursue. So I took the liberty of doing that, or was assigned the liberty of doing that, I guess is more accurate. So I came up with 3 sort of high-level options and then broke down those options into sub-levels a little bit as I thought made sense. So the first item would just be your standard superintendent search. We hire a company, or we do it ourselves, and they go out and do the search process for us, right? Full process, meeting with the community, setting up committees, etc. And obviously the interim superintendent could apply for that if he wanted to, with or without the board requesting. So we could request that they apply for that, or they could just on their own apply. The second option was hire the current interim superintendent. Obviously, that would require confirmation of interest by that person, whoever they may be, whoever the interim may be. And the third option,
Nothing awkward about this. Is
nothing,
there?
no. And the third option I came up with was to find an alternate interim superintendent. I'm not saying these are good options. I'm just saying these are the options that I kind of, if we're going to look at all options, these are the 3 kind of ones that I thought of. So for option number 1, A would be to hire a external company to assist. B would be to complete the process internally by ourselves. I'm going to step back up to the timeline in a minute. Option 2 would be to hire the interim. We could do that with option 2A, either a direct hire without any other process. 2B, complete a full standard process with 1 candidate. Option C would be complete a partial review process of whatever we decided made sense. And option D, which I came up with actually while talking with Todd and having him review some of these ideas to make sure I wasn't completely off base, was to convert the current interim superintendent into a permanent superintendent with a 2-year contract. And I'll explain why that may make a lot of sense in a minute, again with interest, if there's interest. And option 3 would be just hire the alternate. So I contacted New Hampshire School Board Association to find out what a basic timeline was. Historically, the process really started in November, December, right? Before our favorite last 2 years, 3 years. The process started kind of in November, December, and proceed from there. When Barrett Christina of the New Hampshire School Board Association got back to me, he basically gave me the timeline of form the search committee September 12th. So like immediately. I went online and did some more research and found a article by him, and there was some SAUs who would form the search committee like in August. So the timeline radically shifted earlier than it had been. I think part of that is the lack of superintendents and the difficulty in finding one. I don't remember if it was Concord or Nashua. One of them did a full search, didn't find anyone they were liked, and are doing another entire full search. So that timeline made me realize, because I was kind of using that as a baseline. So if we're going to do a full search as kind of the conservative, appropriate way to go, what if we wanted to do, say, hire the interim and do some sort of process with them, and if it didn't work out, we wanted to have, of kind of the fallback, conservative thought that we need to make sure we have time to do the other process. But then when I realized that we'd have to start in September, which doesn't give us, the interim superintendent very much time at the school, nor us time to kind of to see how they've done and how they like the school and how everything's kind of gelled and things have been going, which I think would be part of a normal, intelligent process. I realized that was a big issue. So that's what made me come up with option 2B, would be to convert to a permanent 2-year contract. That would give us basically another, what is it now, August, so give us still something like March or April to kind of decide how to proceed. Would give us, should we want to do some kind of, this is really weird talking with you right there. Should we want to do some kind of process to review that person, like a 360 or whatever? It would give us time to do that, and then still give us time to do a full search, should we need to, in the following late summer, fall. So option 1A and B, basically the timing would be very tight. I don't think it would work, to be honest with you. And if we did include the interim superintendent in that, and they agreed to be part of that full search process, it really doesn't give us much time to evaluate kind of the work they've done in the district, which we would be fortunate enough to be able to do because the person would be working with us. So I'd only recommend we do that if the interim superintendent wasn't interested in some sort of permanent position. Option 2A, I didn't think it made sense to hire without another process, at least a 3-year contract, because staff and public input is vitally important, I think, to Newmarket finding a fit that's right for us, right? 2B, to have a full search and pay for that just for one person doesn't make any sense. Like, why not do the full process if you're going to do that and just have them be part of that process? 2C, based on how early searches are starting, I said that would cause an issue if the interim superintendent wasn't interested. Option 3, hire an alternate, just doesn't make any sense. Why would we do that, right? I put it there just because it is technically an option. So that really led me to thinking 2D would be the best way to proceed should that, whoever that interim superintendent, hypothetical person was, is interested. So,
So just so I clarify, 2D would make Todd basically just add on one more year, correct, as opposed to 1 plus 2.
it would add on one more year, but instead of calling them an interim, I think it would only be fair to them and send the signal to the staff that, you know, like this is, we're not just, this is someone we have confidence in, but we'd like to have more time with them. And then, you know, should that, it also gives that person time to say, hey, yeah, this isn't really working out for me. I don't think I'd want to go beyond 2 years, right? And should they be interested, it gives us a longer period to use as part of an evaluation. Should we do a full, a more complex review than just a direct hire, if that makes any sense.
So, I'm not inclined to spend the time or money to go through a full search if we think we have a strong leader who's going to lead the district into the future in an interim position if he's willing to continue his service with the district, right? So I think that's, to me, a conversation. To me, the first conversation is that a possibility?
It is,
right? Like,
yeah.
so like, and after that, I think we start saying like, okay, here's what the possibilities are. I mean, because
So I think we need to.
it's a moot point if that's not.
Right.
Yeah, I think we need
I
to
think we
do
just
two things. I
need
think
to
we need to
talk
decide
about it.
tonight whether we'd be interested in finding out if that person was interested in a more permanent position.
Call me by name, it's like I am who
TA,
I am.
if
It actually exists.
if interim superintendent Todd Allen
Person, I'm
was
sitting
interested
here.
in a full time, and
It's
then
just a weird conversation.
and then we would also need to, I think, decide if Todd was not interested, what avenue we would pursue.
Yeah, I think
Right.
we're not asking him that question right now.
No,
It's
no, no.
awkward to ask that in
Yeah,
public
yeah.
session.
Right.
But yeah, I think any conversation like,
Yeah.
or I think we can have in public session, or maybe we have to go to non-public, if it's gonna start getting like pejorative, like a conversation.
No, I think that's the
of,
two
like,
options we need to
Yeah.
figure out. Those are the two things we need to do immediately. And well, immediately would be to find out if Todd's interested, and then if he was, decide what we would do, and if he wasn't, decide what we would do.
Right, I mean, I think it all rests on 2 before we do 1. Do you know?
Well, it does, but
mean,
we know one of
can
two
do
things
it
is gonna. So we know
simultaneously.
one of two things is gonna happen. He's gonna say I'm
Right.
interested or I'm not interested.
Right,
So we can then say tonight, if he says he's not interested, we would do this. If he
Right.
says he's interested, we would do this. And I don't think he'd be insulted if we said you weren't interested, we were gonna do a full search, I don't think you'd find that like insulting. And if, or we'd do an interim, or if he was interested, we would,
I
you
mean,
know,
I think it all
be
rests on that
geared towards a
decision.
2-year. But do you get my point? Like,
Yeah, I
we have to
mean,
decide what
yes.
the 2 avenues are.
Right.
And I don't think it makes sense to prolong, if we
No,
can,
I
if the
don't.
board's comfortable, to prolong figuring out what those 2 options would be.
I'm
Yeah.
comfortable with that, making that decision sooner than later.
Personally, I think we kind of need to make, we have to make that decision tonight.
Right.
That's what I'm
We have to
saying.
make a search committee by the 12th, 'cause next time we meet is gonna be what?
The first.
First,
Yeah.
so.
That's what I'm saying, is we
Yeah.
have to decide
Well, because
tonight.
So, it is recommended we start one by the 12th. There's no law
No.
saying.
No,
we
no,
start
absolutely
by
not.
the 12th.
Absolutely not, it's
Right.
just recommended by, the school board association, and, yeah, you could wait till mid-October, you could.
And I actually have some, not concerns, but I guess I would really like to know the process that we pay for, what we really get from that, rather than doing it on our own. I just don't,
I can understand that, and I think that makes sense to do, but it doesn't necessarily affect the decision tonight.
no, I
So
know,
should
but
we-
in the
should
near
we say we
future,
wanna
we need to
do
talk
A-
about that.
Should
like
we
the
say we
money
wanna
of
do
it.
1 and 2B or 2D?
Right.
Then yeah.
No, I know
totally,
that's not
you're
gonna
right.
affect the
Yeah,
decision
you're right.
tonight, but I would like to know a little more about that process. I
Sure.
felt very excluded from the process prior, so I
Yeah,
would
no,
like to be more
absolutely.
involved
If-
in that.
if that's the option,
Yeah.
yeah, of course.
There's 2 things I think we ought to do tonight as a group that don't really foreclose many options. One, just agree that we are going to formally ask this hypothetical interim superintendent who might or might not exist, whether they're interested in taking the job on this 2-year basis. But the second thing we probably need to do is simply put the word out to the community that, assuming we're going to go down the path, speak now or prepare to hold your peace for 2 years. Because, and not anticipating any particular reaction, but if there is, a strong point of view there, we need to become aware of it as quickly as possible.
I'm in agreement with Dan. I think one, we just at some point, not some point, well, no, at some point, we're gonna need an answer from Todd whether he's interested or not, because then, is that totally our whole thing?
You do have to officially ask me, and then I can give you an answer.
So we can decide when we wanna ask.
Do we wanna go in non-public, at all to discuss anything before we?
I mean,
That
I
would be good.
could say anecdotally, I've heard nothing but positive things from people's interactions.
You're talking about like.
Well, just, I don't know how
I mean,
Todd's comfortable with us talking
Yes.
about him in public.
think
Well,
we-
there's nothing, I don't know if there's anything in non-public we would discuss that would be
Isn't there-
appropriate to be in non-public. Like, I
Isn't
don't,
one of them hiring?
Yeah, hiring though.
yeah, but we're talking about the process we're gonna choose right now.
Well, I think we need the
We have to decide
discussion
whether or not we're gonna
yeah,
offer him the.
based
That's hiring.
too, that's under hiring, right?
Well, we're gonna decide whether we're gonna ask him if he's interested.
But to
I think
do
we
that-
all need to know that that's a piece of information.
Right.
Well, yeah,
I think-
but we
we need
retire.
to discuss
But
it in
that's
a-
different than saying we're interested in hiring, right? Saying,
Yeah,
are you
yeah, we're-
interested?
Yeah. So can we say by next meeting, we're gonna have an answer from Todd whether he's interested?
I can say by next meeting, if you guys are okay with it, I will ask him.
Yes.
Whether he decides to answer us
Oh
by
my
next
God,
meeting.
that's-
Well, no, I'm not gonna say, I mean, we'd like obviously an answer as soon as possible.
You don't have to answer the question, but somewhere in your mind, do you have an inclination one way or another already?
Okay,
I'll
that's- you okay answering that?
I
'Cause
will,
that's-
I will.
I said you didn't have to answer.
Okay.
I know, but
appreciate
still,
that.
it's-
I'll tell you what I told Gary, when we were informally discussing the options. I am committed to doing what needs to be done to help Newmarket through whatever transition you decide you need to do. So, I would be inclined to be interested if that were something you wanted to pursue. I can't guarantee that I would throw my hat in the ring for a long-term position at this point, because that's a different level of commitment, because I personally believe that when you're hiring a new superintendent, if you're hiring somebody for the long term, you want them for at least 5 or more years. And I think one of the struggles that Newmarket's had is you've had repeated 3-year stints that haven't resulted in a result that you're looking for. So I just feel like I want to be honest with you about that. So that's my
So does that mean you would stay on for an additional year? Is that what you're saying? I'm confused.
I would be open to that conversation about it
Okay.
in terms of if we could negotiate a term for that.
Okay.
Yes. Yep.
and that's
That's that's enough.
hypothetically you, that's.
That's enough.
Like this Dan's
That's a real
second
you.
point. So we can at least talk about that. Dan's second point is, I agree. Like, I think we need to give the community, like, actively ask them, like, does someone feel strongly we need to have a full search, or so to speak, never hold your peace sort of feeling.
No, real quick when you say that, we're not talking
I know.
about like sending out a survey, we're just talking about.
No, I'm literally
Okay,
saying,
this
send
is
us an
your
email,
opportunity.
call our houses,
Okay.
go like, everything's on the website, right? Like, get hold, last thing we need is on a survey.
Right.
But yeah, just please come to the meeting, talk, like, let us know by next meeting where you're
Yeah,
at.
actively ask them, but we also need to time constrain it. We
By next
we
meeting,
need
Next
to
meeting.
know, yeah.
Yeah, like by next meeting, like, yeah.
by
Come
5
talk.
PM.
Look at this capacity crowd we have today, let's.
Would that be, if we do that, can we formally start doing create a search committee within 2 weeks?
If we do what?
If we wait another meeting to make this decision?
So you're saying if we wait
do
and
a
find
full
out
search.
somebody said something that led us to not wanna ask him, could we
Yeah,
get a search committee?
If Todd, so we don't meet until the first.
Well, I think like Phil pointed out, it doesn't have to be that date, and you can certainly send out a letter of interest to create a survey, to create a,
20th, right?
yeah,
Like, let's
to
say-
create a committee, we certainly send out a letter
just send it.
within an
Give
hour
them like
or something.
5 days
right?
usually
Couple
about
hours.
Okay.
to let them reply.
Personally, I hope that we would do the additional year. I think we would do, I think it'd be awesome. That's me.
So, I agree with you, so is it fair to say the
Ditto.
board's interested in 2D,
Yes,
and if that didn't work out, 1?
I would support that 100%, 2D,
I agree.
I
without
agree.
any doubt in my mind.
And Todd, I just want to add, I greatly appreciate that you want to do what's best for our district. Please also do what's best for your family.
Yes, absolutely.
And I also really appreciate you humoring this weird probabilistic conversation.
Which in and of itself should make you not want to be interested, but,
This conversation is bordering on quantum mechanics.
yes.
I think I just saw his face just going, I'm starting to be inclined the other way.
Okay, let's move along before we, so there's no action items that I'm aware of. So we'll move along right away. I'm correct, there's no action items?
Well, actually, we had one more
Wow.
discussion item. I was, Eric is
No,
not
I'm
here.
sorry, no action items on,
Oh, yeah.
on the previous topic,
Do we,
which may or may not
I
have
have a
been
quick
discussed.
question. Previously, as a board, we have voted on the school reentry plans, and I notice it's not on the action items here. Do we need to? It's been a really weird, kind of like when we approved and when we didn't approve.
Right.
Yeah.
I guess I would defer to you. You guys know the politics of this community much better than I do. Yeah, I mean, certainly,
We have in
I-
the past.
yeah, so if that's been past practice, then let's just add it and do it. I think that would be
Yeah, I
helpful.
guess just if no other reason than to have the burden be on us, then anyone else.
That's why I would prefer.
Yeah.
So is everyone okay if we add an action item?
Yes.
7 to vote on the school reentry plan as presented.
60% chance I'm okay with that.
Believe vote. All right. Reentry plan. All right. Hopefully Patty can understand what I just said. All right. So next we have a discussion. Who I assume Todd, you're going
Yeah,
to take
I'll-
over handing that about adding some additional NES special education case managers.
So this actually stems from our dialogue around getting enough paraprofessionals to cover a lot of the responsibilities we had. And one of the things that Eric and I were talking about was the idea that if we sort of change our instructional delivery model with our case managers and have case managers take on more, in fact, the number that Erica uses, 25%, kind of pushing into the classroom, being more in the classroom, providing that direct instructional support, that co-teaching type stuff, that if we change that model, we might be able to make up for a number of the the shortage of paraprofessionals if we hired an additional case manager at the elementary school. So basically what it would mean is if we did this, it it would expand by 1 FTE, obviously on the professional staff side. The funding would come from the fact that we're 16 or 17 pairs short right now. And actually in reviewing the data, I mean, Erica told me that in her entire time in Newmarket, we've never been fully staffed in pairs. We've typically been 6. That's the best situation. We've been 6 short. So we can assume that pattern will at least exist. So the funding for an additional position would easily be able to be found in, you know, if you look at it from a salary standpoint, roughly 2.5 paraprofessionals equals 1 professional staff member. So we were proposing tonight was to give us the authority to see if we could do that, because if we could, that will solve some of the issue regarding our paraprofessional shortage. And just, I did have a conversation with us about our paraprofessional union leadership, and they thought it was a great idea. They felt that, you know, as much as ideally they'd love to have a fully staffed, you know, a unit, they recognize that that has not happened, and so for them, any additional staffing is going to be beneficial to them. And I do think there is, on an educational basis, there's value to be had in more co-teaching, co-planning between special education and regular ed, to be able to just make modifications at the classroom level. I mean, Patty mentioned, you know, looking at MTSS as one of the things we're trying to look at. The more you can meet students' needs at the classroom level, there's less of a need to be pulling them out to provide supports and that kind of thing. So this was a model that Erica and I believe can work. I mean, and over time, we might want to look at maybe more case managers and just shifting our model entirely, because even with you know, increased salary and so forth, I'm not sure that the paras are out there to be hired. I don't know right now. So anyway, that's the idea, and we were looking to, if you would give us authority to do that. There have been, in fact, in a minute you're going to be presented with the two case managers we've just recently hired, but we do have at least one other that applied that we haven't chosen, but certainly might be somebody we might be considering hiring if that was something that the board wanted to do.
Can I just quickly ask for clarification, because I think there might be a typo in the sentence. Are we, is the proposal to hire at least 1 or to hire exactly 1?
Well,
because I could read this sentence one of 2
well,
ways.
I guess what we're looking for is the authority to see what the possibilities are. If you know, if we can get 1, 2 would be even better. And again, we are currently down 16 paraprofessionals, so it's a big hole. For whatever reason, we've been having better luck getting case managers than we have getting paras, and so we would be looking for the authority to do. You know,
So
right now there's 1 person that's a possibility, but certainly 2 would be even better.
So we're looking for the authority to do this
One
as
or
many
more.
times as the administration thinks makes sense.
As we can make happen,
Okay.
because there's a timeliness to this, in that we'd like to be as fully staffed for the start of school as we can get. If we can get 1, we'd like to be able to jump on it. If we could get 2, that would be even better. But right now, those people don't exist yet, so I can't speak to whether that's an option. So if you would authorize 1, that would be great. If you would authorize 2, we could see what we could do.
Do you anticipate then building this into the budget for next year?
Yeah, we would probably need to take a look at that when we make those decisions about next year. Again, like I said, we've been down 6 paras on a good year, so it would be, we're just simply shifting monies from the para salary line into professional staff.
Do you think the other districts will let these case managers out of their contract at this late?
That's a great question. I mean, it's right now, I don't think there's any certainty in anything we're doing. The only certainty I can give you is we are certainly down 16 paraprofessionals.
Okay.
And
17.
I'm sorry, 17. And I would tell you that Erica has been working really hard, and she has had multiple offers, but in the last week, I think she offered 4 people para jobs, and only 1 ended up taking it. So, and then we just had another one resign. So we're just not getting ahead. So that's the only certainty I have. It's an idea. If if we could get the authority to move forward on it, we would try to do it. And I think it would be a good model. Actually, at Oyster River, when I was over there, that we actually did a restructuring of our case management model, particularly at the middle school level, and found that having case managers more intimately involved in the classroom on a more regular basis actually paid dividends, not just to special education kids, it paid dividends to everybody, because typically what you discover is things that work well for a student with a learning disability are just actually things that might actually benefit everybody, and so structures can actually be implemented that are good for everybody. So
based on leaving 3 educating positions open, I'm assuming she's only asking for 1. What's the most that would be useful to the district?
I think 2 is about as many as we could I think right now, because it isn't, we have to try it, and we have to do some reorganizing. I mean, certainly 1 would, it would be great to get 1, because I think we actually have somebody that might even be that person if we can get that.
I just don't want to wait till September 1st and then find out we want another one. Like, I'd rather just authorize you to do up to 2 or something.
Yeah, I mean, that would give us the maximum flexibility, and again, 6 paras is really have been the best we've done, and the funding for 6 paras is roughly equivalent to the funding for 2 professionals.
So I love the idea of trying something structurally different to try to make it work. So especially given the landscape that I know we've talked about a lot over the negotiations. I know that because the budget's already approved, it's leaving 3 paraprofessional positions vacant for certified staff. Like some level of when it comes to next year's budget, we're not going to carry over those vacant positions and a case manager.
Right. I think you're kind of going back to your conversation earlier. Yeah, we definitely have to make some decisions on that and determine whether it's working. And if it's working well, then I think the answer would be that we would simply move those positions out.
I super appreciate your test and learn mentality of it, like that 1, maybe 2 max, just to try to figure out if that's even helpful. Because at some point, it's probably diminishing returns.
Yeah.
You just need more staff.
I think technically, Jenna may smack me, but we're working on the following budget, so I don't think you technically could take it out of the...
That's what I said, you can't take it out of, but the one when we build next year's budget,
But we're building it in this fall. We won't know the results of the effectiveness of this until...
yeah, but you're gonna have to build the case manager in the next year budget because they're gonna be on staff. So whether you know the effectiveness or not, you're gonna have to eliminate those positions to pay for the case
And
manager.
we could hire it as a 1-year position and see how that goes. And that would give us, we could leave things from a budgetary standpoint as they currently stand. Janet's not shaking her head at me, so I guess that.
So that's a good thing.
So we could, do both. I mean, basically, in the short term, we're saying, okay, we're going to try this. We hire somebody on the idea, because frankly, every hire is a 1-year contract. It's just a question of, at the end of that time, is there a possibility of it continuing or not?
I wouldn't want to slam the door on that as hard as it is to recruit. I don't want people coming in with the feeling that they don't have an expectation beyond 1 year.
I think we'll have a sense within a couple of months whether it's a model that is working for us. So I do think there's a possibility in November, December we say, hey, this is really let's make this change.
And to be fair, case managers tend to always need a case manager at the end of the year because there's a lot of opportunities for them. So.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, part of me, I guess, it doesn't feel like the best thing to trade 3 sets of hands for 1, but if you're not going to get 3 sets of hands regardless, then you might as well, get the ones that we can get.
Yeah.
And I will point out, and I don't know the source of this information, but I've heard that there's 331 paraprofessional openings in New Hampshire. So there's such a deficit. It's not just Newmarket. I mean, I think it's the country, but yeah. So.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if you told me that number was Rockingham County.
Yeah, and that's why I'm not entirely sure of the source, but it may have just been Manchester and Nashua put together, right? All right, moving on.
If you want to take a, I'm sorry, you got it there. Never mind. No, I was just going to get voting on it, but you're right. You do it at the end. We change the format. My bad.
Change the format. All right. So just a reminder to folks that we move the public comment further down the agenda to give them an opportunity to come to the meeting should they be interested in it. And speak on any of the items being discussed or actioned. And to be, I don't see any members of the public, but just to be policy minded, I'm going to open floor to public comment at 6:35. And assuming I don't hear any pitter patter feet running down the hallway, oh, my clock just changed, so I will close public comment at 6:36. So if people are interested, this is the time. Make sure you come down. We move things later to try to help out folks. With that, we're going to move on to our action items. Action item number 1 is the second reading and approval of the Newmarket School District Safety and Health Program, which was submitted by the Joint Loss Committee. Does anyone have any thoughts, questions on that before we move to the vote?
Can I just ask, what training is going to be done for the teachers as they come back to school, the safety plan? I'm sorry.
This is why Janet's an honorary member.
Well, I was part of the committee, and it's not fair to Todd to have to answer some of this stuff. So we have a standard set of required trainings that get done every year. Some of them happen virtually. We do a push from one of our training providers, and people do webinars online and submit, the training. I know that we have the signs of suicide training, which is another required training, and that's coming up. We tend to, because we have this additional professional development time, we try not to offer all of the batch of training and take 2 days of the first couple days of school to do that. So I think they wind up being staged throughout the year at different times. The statutes generally say that they have to receive training within the year. They don't have to have it before the start of the year. And most, like for anti-bullying training, that's something that we have to do every year, but most of the staff that have been here or worked in a school has already received that training. They will receive it again. So we kind of try and stage it, and I know Patty's working very hard on setting up schedules for those, the Wednesdays and for the extra days. So that's kind of how we plan to address that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. So I'd seek a motion to accept or to approve rather the Newmarket School District Safety and Health Program.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Andrew, second by Dan Smith. Is any more discussion? Hearing none, move to the vote. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Motion passes unanimously. Next, I'd seek a motion to approve the August 4th, 2022 public and non-public minutes.
Present, I wasn't there, so that has to
Yeah,
go.
yeah, we'll do, once we get a motion, we can do some
Oh, sorry.
adjustments. No, that's fine.
So moved.
Second. Oh, I can't.
I'll second.
All right, we have motion by Phil Nazaro and a second by Andrew Henniker. Is there any discussion? I have some corrections.
This is horrible to have to ask because she sits next to me, but was Lila here for this?
She was not. So
Yeah.
Lila was not there. Amy was not present. Was not absent and present at the same time.
Yeah, I was
So we may
present
want to
and
strike the.
Was she not here? Didn't she come right at the beginning? Yeah.
That was the meeting
I was
before.
remembering it was
Yeah,
July.
it was a meeting.
Yeah,
They all mushed together.
don't they? I don't see any other corrections. All right, hearing no further discussion, I would seek a have. All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
With the edits.
With edits,
Yes.
thank you. Well, the motion's already on the floor, so
Oh, I'm
technically,
sorry.
yeah.
Okay.
So we have motion and second on the floor, all those in favor, say aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Wait. If we're gonna amend them, do we need a separate motion to do that?
Well, it's a great question. I mean, what we usually used to do, I think on the budget committees,
We'd vote to approve as amended.
so we've discussed them before even making the motion.
No, we always did the motion first, then we'd do amendments, then we'd vote as amended.
In this case, you're just talking about a correction for who was in attendance,
Yeah.
right? You could just call it a friendly amendment. And
That's
just vote.
exact, friendly amendments, the terms that I've used before.
All favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, that's 4 approved. All those against say nay. Anyone absent? All those abstaining? Amy?
Sorry.
All right. Motion passes 4-0 with 1 abstention. Action item number 3 is the manifest.
Make a motion.
No,
Non-public.
Four.
non-public meetings, minutes. You
No,
didn't
we
do
did
it.
those together.
That's late.
Oh, you did them together?
I did.
Oh, okay,
It's
sorry.
efficient.
Guess I'm not
Everything's done.
listening to you.
Told Todd 7 o'clock every meeting. I'm running late. All right. Go ahead,
Okay.
sorry.
Make a motion to approve the manifest for the week of August 18th, 2022 for the amount of $356,929.73.
Second.
Motion, second by Bill. Any discussion?
There's 3.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Seek a motion to authorize the superintendent to hire up to 2 additional Newmarket elementary school special education case managers.
So moved.
I'm sorry.
Second.
Motion by Dan Smith, second by Amy Tilton. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Next we have personnel matters.
Yes, so actually, on the subject of case managers, we have hired 2, actually, very good case managers. I actually interviewed them both, great candidates. Stockton McGinnis goes by the name Talk, if you get a chance to meet him. Talk McGinnis, very experienced. He's got 9 years of case management experience. Very impressive gentleman. And then Sarah Driscoll, she actually had multiple offers and is choosing to come to us. Exceptional young lady from recently out of college, but she is, enthusiastic and exactly the kind of person we want in the Newmarket schools. So they have both accepted contracts. So I just wanted to inform you of that.
Since we authorize you to put in contracts, do we technically need to approve that?
It's your call. You did authorize me for the summer to do it. So.
All right, so we won't do that. And next, I would seek a motion to approve the junior, senior high, and elementary school reentry plan presented by Todd tonight.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Andrew, second by Dan. Any discussion? Thank you very much for putting that together, and to the all the staff who helped out and the nurses who, I don't know how they've done what they've done.
Yeah, we've got some really remarkable people in this district who've been doing a lot. So
Absolutely. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Next, I'd seek a motion to enter into non-public session to discuss litigation and advice from counsel under RSA 91A3 2E.
So moved.
You got it.
So moved.
Andrew,
Second.
second, Phil. Sorry, we should have done this by roll call vote. I will just do it now. Phil Nazaro.
Aye.
Andrew Hammaker.
Aye.
Amy Tilton.
Aye.
Gary Swanson, aye. And Dan Smith.
Aye.
We are in non-public at 6:44.